Once there was a man who fathered 3 children. His wife was the mother of only the first one. The others came from extramarital affairs. The second child became a painter.
We all hide parts of ourselves to protect ourselves from outside criticism or destruction, or sometimes because we just don't like to face who we really are. The subject of hidden is my father, who appears at 2 different ages in this painting. And it was inspired by a story he told of himself as a boy in Philadelphia. He found a New Testament in a gutter. As a Jewish boy, he was really not supposed to be reading the New Testament, but he found it to be so much more interesting than the Old Testament that he hid it behind a loose brick in a wall. That was his hiding place. After my father died, I learned that he had hidden his personal correspondence with his lovers, including my mother and my brother's mother, behind some books in his bookshelf. And I was struck by the visual similarities between the 2 hiding places and by my father's parallel thought processes so many years apart. Hi, I'm Alexandra Tyng, known as Alex to most people. And I'm an artist practicing in the Philadelphia area, in Narberth specifically.
Long before I met her, or ever really even knew anything about her, I fell in love with Alexandra Tyng's beautiful narrative paintings. Filled with naturalistic light and color, they hint at the mysteries of family life. And though I don't believe you need to know the artist to find meaning in the art, suffice it to say that what was once fragmented and incomplete in Alex's actual life, she has integrated and made whole in her art.
Painting The Wish was so exciting for me because it was the first in what became a whole series of family paintings. I got the idea from 2 photos I had taken of my mother and my brother's mother blowing out candles at their 80th birthday parties. And in my imagination, I saw this firestorm of energy being created by the flames blowing together. And then I saw my father's face rising out of the flames in my imagination. So that became the focal point of the painting. When my father was 3 years old, he saw these glowing coals, grabbed them, and they flared up and burned his face. And that accident changed his life radically. In mythology, fire is a transforming principle that changes one's life forever. Creatures in myths that assume human form cannot return to their original form if their skins are burned while they're human. In A Wish, my father becomes the vehicle for change. So it's about the wish for transformation in a positive direction. And there are 9 people in the painting, and each one is helping to facilitate the transformation. We have our personal wishes, but there's also one wish that's shared by everyone in the painting, and that's for our family to be together. I got the idea to paint art and legacy during a period when I was frustrated by the way my father had neglected to make sure his artwork would go to all the people he promised it to when he died. And that got me thinking about myself, painting happily in my studio, not thinking about my responsibility to my own children to leave instructions on what to do with my paintings when I die. So in this painting, my father is inside a tower working on a watercolor in solitude. He's using a glass of water that's holding flowers as his paint water. I couldn't resist putting in that detail to emphasize how absorbed he always was in his inner world. His children are all looking in, but we can't get to him. We can't see him clearly because the glass is foggy. And each of us sees him through a different window or a different perspective, just as siblings do in reality. So in art and legacy, This dynamic between me, my siblings, and our father is meant to represent all artists, all people whose lives have been touched by this kind of situation.
This kind of situation, indeed. In 1940, architect Louis Kahn and his wife Esther Israeli Kahn, a University of Pennsylvania research scientist, had a daughter that they named Sue Ann. Sue Ann Kahn grew up to become a prominent musician and archivist. In 1945, Lou began a relationship with fellow architect Ann Tyng. Their daughter, Alex, was born in 1954. Starting around 1959, when Lou became involved with landscape architect Harriet Pattison, he more or less disappeared from Alex's life for some years. Lou and Harriet's son, Nathaniel, was born in 1962. He would go on to become a prominent filmmaker. Alex, you have an older half-sister and a younger half-brother, but you didn't meet them until you were 16. When did you first become aware of your brother's existence?
I was about 8.5, and I was walking across the street with my mother. She said, "You have a brother now." And I was kind of startled, and I was like, well, how did that happen? And she had to explain to me the background of that. I didn't ask her more questions at the time, but when I would see little boys that might have been his age, is that my brother? It kind of looks like it might be my brother. Or what did he look like, and where would I meet him?
And your parents didn't try to introduce?
No, they did not make any move to do that. I think my father didn't want to be the one to initiate that, but it worked out great. Yeah, I just felt like everybody was at the point where they wanted to meet. And my sister said the same thing. She said, I was waiting for you to be old enough to contact me in your own right, then we would meet, because I'm 14 years younger than she is. So she didn't want to disrupt my household by calling me and saying, I'm your sister, let's meet. In my mind also, I didn't know if I should call them, what kind of reception I would get, but it all worked out.
Although it may have all worked out, Alex made a painting about what it felt like when she was a child going through this.
The letter A is an imaginary scene, and it's a conglomeration of many real events. That's me as a child making a chalk drawing on the street in front of my house in Philadelphia where I grew up. I was about the age when I was beginning to be conscious of myself as a separate being from my parents, with my own perceptions and my own way of making sense of life. The title refers to the letter A that appears as a symbol throughout Nathaniel Hawthorne's book, The Scarlet Letter, which I read in high school. And I was secretly fascinated by the book because the main characters reminded me of myself and my parents. I admired the little girl Pearl, especially because she refused to be a victim of her parents' situation, and I really liked how she handled that. So I've put the letter A in many places in the painting.
Thankfully, strong women have played a major role in Alex's life.
After my mother died, I wondered how she navigated being a single mother in the 1950s, which was such a conventional time period. And New World came out of that thought process. She's drifting off the coast of Maine in a pea-pod dory, which has no bow or stern, so there's no indication of which way she's headed. Maybe she doesn't know which way to go. She's venturing into uncharted territory as a new mother, and you can probably guess I'm the baby in the painting. The apple I'm holding is a reference to Eve's expulsion from the Garden of Eden. And it's also a more personal reference to the apple seeds that were brought from Old England to New England by Anne Hutchinson in the 1600s. Anne Hutchinson was a force, not afraid to go against the status quo. And I can say the same thing about my mother. The grandmothers could be called a self-portrait in the sense that I'm sitting rather formally in a chair, but the two women behind me make this more than just a portrait because they tell a story. They're from the late Victorian era, and I painted them in a sepia tone like an old photograph, but their arms gradually become more infused with color and life as they reach forward to touch the back of the chair. Both my grandmothers were healers in a very natural, informal way. My maternal grandmother's father had studied with Mary Baker Eddy, and she herself had a calming influence on people. She was intelligent and a good listener. My paternal grandmother immigrated to the U.S. from Estonia, where natural healing was part of the culture. Her father passed a family healing secret on to my grandmother, who was insightful and very similar in personality to my other grandmother. For some reason, I've always felt a strong connection with both my grandmothers, although I never met my father's mother. And this painting refers to that connection and to my own interest in healing. Brief Window is about my grandparents' house, and it's based on my experience that layers of time can coexist. The house had burned down many years ago, but my husband and I drove down to Maryland to find the location of the house, using my memory of the curves in the road. I expected the place to have the same special aura that I remembered from my childhood, and I was shocked at how ordinary it looked. My husband was getting frustrated trying to imagine what it used to look like, and he said, "I just wish I could see it in reality, just for a minute." And I thought, what if I could make a painting that could shift between past and present? And I was working with a palette knife. Something emerged, a kind of shimmering effect around the house that showed glimpses of the house itself and the open view and the old wooden fence. Around that, I recreated the whole experience of us in the car and having to rely on a paper map to find the house because the car's navigation system wasn't able to find it.
Overlapping of time is a major theme in Alex's art. Past, present, and future events can appear in harmonious communion. I was surprised to learn that as a child, Alex developed second sight.
The unseen aspect is about the first time I realized I had seen something before it actually happened. The scene in the painting is of me and my mother on the shore of the Chesapeake Bay, near my grandparents' house, which was an old farmhouse with a new wing that my mother had designed. The painting is not literal, more like a whole story condensed into a symbolic scene. When I was about 5, we were going swimming, so I had to go upstairs to get my towel. I looked up and I saw this raging fire in the upstairs hall. And the thing is, I knew it wasn't actually there, but I could see it plainly superimposed on the hallway. "I can't go up there, there's fire up there." And my mother was really annoyed at me. She said, "That's ridiculous." And she made me go upstairs. Walking down the hall, I was so scared. I didn't understand what had just happened. Years later, my mother got the news that my grandparents' house had totally burned to the ground. Instantly, that memory of seeing the fire just popped into my head. My mother was crying, but all I could do was just blurt out, "So that's what that was all about." When I was about 8 years old, I went to Miquon Camp, and one day our counselor announced that she was going to take our group on a hike up the stream to its source. I couldn't wait to go. We waded upstream. The woods became denser and more overhung with vines, and the woods became completely unfamiliar to me, and the stream led to an old stone spring house that was built into the side of the hill. Behind that was a deserted house. Our counselor pointed out a crack in the wall of the spring house where water was trickling down into a wet, mossy depression. And then right below that, a small flow of water made its way downhill, and I could see the stream below us. This hike made such a deep impression on me that I had recurring dreams about it for years. Then a generation later, when my children were at Miquon School, I unexpectedly found the spring house and house again. It was calling to me to paint it as I remembered it, because not only was it the source of the stream, but the source of dreams and imagination and inspiration. I painted my son in the foreground, dipping his hand in the water as if he's making contact with the source. Some of the most inventive, unexpected, meaningful connections happen when the mind is in a dreaming state, unfiltered by the rational mind. Several years ago, a friend gave me his dream to paint. He'd had the dream while he was in the hospital, and he'd made some notes so he wouldn't forget it. And I realized that the dream was bursting with symbolism. We don't usually crawl out of a hospital lobby in a gown and find that the hospital is attached to the Philadelphia Art Museum. I like art that reveals something new every day, but that also still holds enigmas, because it keeps me thinking. So in the end, I don't think it matters whether somebody figures out every single thing the artist was trying to say.
Alex Tyng is a good person. Regarding her family situation, she wrote to me, quote, "There was no organized reunion or one big event. Reconciliation was a series of naturally occurring events that happened over decades." I have to say that Alex was the instigator of those naturally occurring events. When she was 16, she went to New York City to meet her older sister, Sue Ann Kahn. Later, she met her younger brother, Nathaniel Kahn, and his mother, Harriet Pattison. Over time, Alex also befriended Lou's wife, Esther, and gradually there was a general rapprochement between all the parties. Fixing this family seems miraculous to me, but perhaps the secret to it lies within this painting.
The title royalty comes from a word game, kind of like Scrabble with cards. At the time I painted this, my siblings and I were trying to sort out who had the copyrights to my father's work. So the card game is like a discussion. And we're playing with one additional person, my friend Nan, who taught me how to play royalty. Nan's also keeping score. I'm about to take my turn, and the viewer can see the letters on my cards, but it's not clear what word I'm going to make, and I don't know how the other players will respond. Some sharp observers will notice that I have an extra card. Am I cheating? Am I taking what doesn't belong to me? Am I taking what rightfully belongs to me? Or is there another reason why I have it? Is it a metaphor? Royalty is a game that involves both competition and cooperation. A player can't succeed without building on what other players have contributed.
In one of my favorite of her paintings, Alex comically deals with the aftermath of all this mishigas.
The idea behind Scavengers developed while an author was working on a biography of my father. This was the first time anyone outside our family had written anything approaching a personal biography of him. Naturally, my siblings and I were apprehensive about how the author would use the material we gave her. When the reviews came out, we felt that our personal boundaries had been invaded. And I let out some steam with this painting, for sure. I really enjoyed painting it, with the walls dissolving and all the details. One of my artist friends loaned me her stuffed seagull. He was a great model for all the gull close-ups. When I was about halfway through, I began to see that the loss of privacy had a universal relevance. Scavengers steal our passwords and our account numbers. They read our texts and messages. They scam us and steal our sense of security. What was private is now public. The walls are down.
I am an intrusive person, and when walls are down, I intrude. All right, mean question. Mm-hmm. If love and hate are on a scale from 10 to 0, where does your father lie?
Well, okay, definitely love, 10. I mean, I loved him very much. You know, I didn't always like what he did, but hate never came into it.
Did you ever ask him about why did you do these things that some people would consider crummy?
I started to do that near the end of his life. And as usual, when he was faced with a difficult question, he would just remain silent. He never really answered me. So that was disturbing.
In Nathaniel's brilliant film, My Architect, a wise Bangladeshi explains how great artists like Louis Kahn can love all of mankind, but be a little blind to those closest to him. Whether or not you buy that, I do know something about the creative personality. So I'm going to end my movie about Alex's family paintings with a little armchair psychoanalysis. Though I have seen some exceptions, I've found that inside most serious artists is a deep core of selfishness and self-imposed isolation. It is a necessity to spend much of the time alone within one's own mind. That's how art gets made. I imagine that most non-artists look at this painting and think, that old man should come out and be with his kids. But an artist sees this painting and thinks, that old man should get out so I can go in there.
In Birth of an Idea, I'm in a lighthouse that I use to represent an ivory tower where the artist works in solitude. And I'm standing behind the reflection of the setting sun with my eyes closed, deep in thought, and the light is enveloping me like a cocoon. It's the moment of inspiration, the very beginning of the process I go through when I create a painting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, you are a remarkably good person.
No, I'm not always good.
All right. Sorry in my view, you're a saint. So, okay, that's that. Why do I think that Alex is a saint? Because it wasn't just in her art that she brought her family back together again. To see more of Alex's work, visit Instagram, Facebook, and alexandratyng.com.